December 31st, 1983, 24-year-old Samuel Arthur Todd and his brother Adam were visiting some friends in their loft in Chinatown, New York City. Their friends owned a space 5 flights above Canal Street with several other semi-permanent residents. They had not originally planned on hosting a New Year's Eve party. Instead, they had wanted to go to other New Year's Eve parties around the city. However, a number of people stopped by the loft and they eventually decided to have a full-blown party of their own. Sam himself had graduated from Vassar in 1981 and he was a student at Yale Divinity School. He was known for taking active roles in social justice causes and he planned on becoming a minister like his father. Sam and his brother were both big George Orwell fans, so they wanted to celebrate the new year, 1984. Sam consumed a great deal of alcohol at the party and before long he felt very intoxicated. He began to feel dizzy and lightheaded, so his brother suggested he step outside to get some fresh air. Sam started jogging toward Houston Street in order to shake off the dizziness. That was the last time anyone ever saw him. After leaving the party, he simply vanished. When Adam realized that his brother had still not returned, he told his friends that Sam was missing. They agreed to go out looking for him. At first, they thought it was funny. To them, it seemed like Sam was probably just drunk and had gotten lost and they would eventually come across him. At one point, one of the people in the group almost fell down an elevator shaft after a gust of wind pushed them. This incident made them realize that the city was far more dangerous than they thought, especially for someone who was highly intoxicated. They also realized that Sam had left the party without his coat and with no money in his pockets. Before long, the search party began to feel desperation closing in. They ended up contacting the authorities, but the police did not take their report seriously. Adam resigned himself to showing up at homeless shelters in order to see if his brother would be at one. His friends even left the door of their loft unlocked just in case Sam was able to find his way back. Their efforts did not work. 3 days after they had initially reported Sam's disappearance to the police, law enforcement finally started taking the case seriously. It went on the news and a hotline was set up for tips. Volunteers were organized to search the city and everyone who had been at the party was questioned. Law enforcement searched rivers while friends and family checked soup kitchens and more homeless shelters. Roughly 14,000 missing persons flyers were distributed. None of their efforts ever paid off. To this day, what happened to Sam is still unknown. Various theories have been posited, but none have any hard evidence to back them up. One theory suggests that Sam may have been kidnapped by a cult and was sacrificed, although this is very far-fetched. Another theory suggests that he may have been misidentified as gay and was murdered by someone who targeted gay men. Yet another theory suggests that he may have had a mental breakdown and suffered an accident. Sam's friends and family have rejected each of these theories. It seems as though the fate of Samuel Todd will remain a mystery forever. Alan Holmes was born in Northern Ireland and he studied law at Queen's University in Belfast. He never graduated and instead moved to London in 1964. He became a civilian employee for the Metropolitan Police in 1979, where he worked as a motor mechanic at the Kentish Town Police Station. Alan lived alone in a block of flats that badly needed to be redeveloped. He himself was described as gregarious and extroverted. On Christmas Day in 1995, the 53-year-old visited some of his friends in Isleworth, Middlesex. They ate Christmas dinner and then dropped Alan off at his flat. According to the sources I read, London becomes very empty during Christmas time because many of its residents travel elsewhere for the holiday. Therefore, it was surprising that there were 2 separate burglaries only 50 yards away from each other that day. The first one occurred at a convenience store and the second was at Alan's flat. After the first robbery, the police arrived too late to catch the perpetrator. When the second burglary happened, nobody contacted the authorities. The perpetrator reportedly tortured Alan, although the details of his methods are unknown to the public. After taking Alan's bank card, the burglar tied him to his bed and left the flat. Alan would remain tied to his bed for almost 10 days. The police finally realized that something was wrong when he failed to show up for work on January 2nd of 1996. They arrived at Alan's flat and tried knocking on the door, but they received no response. They left, but after Alan failed to answer his phone, they returned on the 4th. This time they smashed through the front door and found Alan on his bed in terrible condition. They called an ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. Sadly, Alan passed away in University College Hospital from dehydration and blood clotting. His circulation had been entirely cut off by his restraints. Before he died, he told the police what happened. Alan had attempted to scream for help, but his block of flats had been completely empty, so nobody heard him. On December 26th and 27th, Alan's bank card was used around a dozen times in Oxford Circus and the South Bank. Roughly £1,000 were stolen from his account. The police received a description of the man who had tried to withdraw money 4 or 5 times from a cash machine. He was between the ages of 22 and 25, was about 6'1", had an athletic build, and was wearing a gray hoodie with blue jeans and tan boots. Unfortunately, this case happened before CCTV cameras were introduced to outdoor spaces in the UK, so this was the only information about the perpetrator's physical appearance. At the time, 5 different suspects were arrested in relation to Alan's murder. Due to a lack of evidence, none of these arrests panned out. The killer's DNA was eventually decoded 11 years after the murder, but this did not lead anywhere. The case gained widespread publicity in England, but it soon fizzled out because there was so little information to go on. The police received 50 calls with tips, but none of these led anywhere. Local businesses collaborated to offer a reward for any information about Alan's case, but this was also in vain. Many questions still remain unanswered in this case. For example, it's still unknown if the killer worked alone or if they had an accomplice. It's also not clear whether or not Alan could have survived the total amount of time he spent tied to his bed without the perpetrator returning to the flat. There had been some speculation that the killer came back to give him some water, but this is unsubstantiated. There is also the question of whether or not the 2 burglaries were connected. They happened in close proximity to each other, so it's a very strong possibility. However, we'll most likely never know the truth for certain. On September 9th of 2002, Kyron Richard Horman was born in Portland, Oregon to Desiree Young and Kane Horman, an engineer. Desiree and Kane had gotten divorced 8 months into the pregnancy due to irreconcilable differences, and they were granted joint custody of Kyron, but Desiree ended up getting diagnosed with kidney failure. Her medical complication required extensive care, and Kane assumed full custody, although Desiree still remained in her son's life. In 2007, Kane remarried, this time to Terry Moulton, a substitute teacher. While Kyron was attending Skyline Elementary School in Oregon, Terry gave birth to a girl named Kiara. On June 4th of 2010, Terry drove Kyron to school and stayed with him during his science fair. She ended up leaving at 8:45 a.m., and the last thing she remembered was seeing Kyron walking down the hall to his classroom. Strangely, Kyron was marked absent that day, and he was never seen again. Somehow, he had disappeared without a trace. When the police questioned Terry, she stated that after leaving the school, she had gone to 2 different grocery stores between 8:45 and 10:10 a.m. After that, she drove Kiara around the town in order to soothe the toddler's earache. Then she went to the gym until 12:40 p.m. At 1:21 p.m., she arrived home and posted photos of Kyron's science fair on Facebook. At 3:30 p.m., Terry and Kane walked to the bus stop in order to get Kyron. However, the bus driver told them that Kyron had never boarded the bus. Terry called the school and the secretary informed her that Kyron had not been at school that day. The secretary called the police after this conversation. The initial search effort focused on 2 separate areas. One was within a 2-mile radius of the school. The other was on Sauvie Island about 6 miles away. The police never provided their reasoning for searching the island. On June 9th, the Horman family released a statement in the media thanking people for their help and encouraging everyone to continue searching. They also wanted to keep Kyron's name in the news so that people would not forget about his case. On June 12th, roughly 300 people conducted a search in the wooded area around the school, which was unsuccessful. In total, the search effort for Kyron spanned 10 days and included more than 1,300 people. The original reward for information about his case was $25,000, but this expanded to $50,000 by late July. In June of 2010, investigators told Kane that Terry had tried to have him killed. The Horman's landscaper, Rodolfo Sanchez, testified that Terry had offered him a lot of money to murder Kane roughly 5 months before Kyron's disappearance. The authorities convinced Sanchez to confront Terry while wearing a wire, but she did not say anything incriminating. On June 28th, Kane filed for divorce and got a restraining order against Terry, who was granted supervised visitation with Kiara. Around this time, Terry was subjected to 2 separate polygraph exams and she failed both of them, which only served to increase suspicion of her. Also around this time, a grand jury summoned friends of Terry to court in order to testify. One of these friends was Dee Dee Spicer, who was described as very close to Terry. According to Kane, Spicer had given Terry some advice in reference to Kyron that had not been very effective. Spicer cooperated with the police and consented to a search of her property. She also answered questions for 3 consecutive hours. On the day of Kyron's disappearance, Spicer had unexpectedly left work at around 11:30 a.m. and then returned at around 1 p.m. without giving an explanation. She also allegedly helped Terry purchase an untraceable cell phone. In August of 2010, law enforcement announced that they were searching for an unidentified suspect who had been seen by witnesses inside Terry's truck while it was parked outside the school. Also in August, Kane, Desiree, and the school all testified before a grand jury. By November, it was estimated that the search effort for Kyron had cost $1.4 million, and the authorities had received 4,257 tips. On June 1st of 2012, Desiree filed a civil lawsuit against Terry on the grounds that she had been responsible for Kyron's disappearance. She attempted to prove that Terry had kidnapped Kyron, and Desiree sought $10 million in damages. In October, Spicer refused to answer any questions during a deposition regarding this lawsuit. Several of these questions regarded her whereabouts on the day of Kyron's disappearance. She also refused to identify a photo of Kyron. Kane later testified that investigators had told him they had more probable cause to suspect Terry's guilt than they had initially. On July 30th of 2013, Desiree dropped the lawsuit because she did not want to disrupt the investigation. Unfortunately, Kyron Horman's disappearance is still unsolved to this day. Nobody knows what happened that fateful day, although many people strongly suspect that Terry was involved somehow. Hopefully, new information will be brought to light before long, and justice can be served.